The hospital at dawn existed in a strange in-between state. Not night, not morning, but something suspended. Fluorescent lights hummed softly above long corridors, reflecting off polished floors that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Machines breathed for patients who could no longer breathe for themselves. Somewhere, a call bell chimed and went unanswered for just a moment too long. Catherine noticed everything. She had been on her feet since before sunrise, moving through the medical surgical wing with the quiet precision of someone who had learned long ago that noise invited attention. And attention invited mistakes. Her navy scrubs were clean but faded at the seams. Her badge clipped neatly at her waist read, Catherine Hale, RN. Probationary mattered to everyone else. To Catherine, it was just ink. She paused at room 312, checking a chart without leaning against the wall. Blood pressure stable, oxygen saturation holding. She adjusted the IV drip by instinct rather than calculation, fingers moving with practiced certainty. The patient stirred slightly, murmuring something incoherent. "You're doing fine," Catherine said quietly, her voice low and steady. "Just rest." She didn't wait for thanks. She never did. Down the hall, two residents passed her without slowing. "That's the new nurse, right?" one whispered, not bothering to lower his voice enough. "Yeah," the other replied. "Transferred in last month. Real quiet. Keeps her head down." "Well, she better," the first said. "This place eats people alive." They laughed, the sound echoing briefly before disappearing into the hum of the building. Catherine didn't react. She'd heard worse. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse, Linda, scanned the assignment board with a frown. "Hale," she said sharply. "You're floating again today. Which unit?" "Med Surge, for now. And don't even think about going near trauma unless you're told." A pause. "Understood," Catherine said. Linda studied her for a moment, as if searching for something. Resistance, maybe? Or insecurity? Finding neither, she turned away. "You're lucky," another nurse muttered as Catherine passed. "Most rookies don't last 6 months here." Catherine almost smiled. Almost. She moved on. By mid-morning, the hospital had settled into its rhythm. Stretchers rolled past. Doctors argued softly over charts. The smell of antiseptic grew stronger as environmental services worked their way down the wing. Catherine finished charting and washed her hands. Slow, thorough, methodical. She checked the clock. 9:16 a.m. That was when the first sound hit. Not the usual ambulance siren. This was louder, closer, urgent in a way that snapped heads up all across the floor. Then came shouting. Boots. Heavy boots. The automatic doors at the main entrance burst open with a sharp mechanical hiss, followed immediately by chaos. "Clear the hallway! Move! Now! We need Trauma 1." Catherine turned just as armed military police flooded the corridor, rifles angled down but hands locked tight around the grips. Behind them came a gurney pushed at full speed, wheels rattling against the tile. On it lay a man barely visible beneath blood-soaked sheets. And beside the gurney, straining against its harness, was a large, muscular canine. Teeth bared, eyes locked forward with terrifying focus. The dog lunged suddenly, snapping at a resident who got too close. "Back up!" the handler yelled, yanking hard on the leash. Everyone back. The resident stumbled, face pale. "What the hell is that thing doing here?" a surgeon shouted. The handler's voice cracked with strain. "He won't let anyone near the asset." The word asset cut through the noise like a blade. Someone whispered, "Asset." Another voice, quieter but heavy with meaning, answered, "Active duty SEAL. Rank classified." Catherine felt something shift deep in her chest. Not fear, not excitement, recognition. The gurney slammed into Trauma Bay 1. Alarms immediately began to scream. Heart rate erratic, blood pressure dropping fast, oxygen saturation unstable. The SEAL's chest rose shallowly, each breath a visible struggle. Doctors rushed in and then stopped. The canine growled low, stepping between them and the gurney, muscles coiled, ready. "Sedate the dog," a surgeon ordered. The handler shook his head violently. "Negative! This canine is trained not to release under sedation. You try it, you risk a fatal response. Then tranquilize it. Same outcome." The dog lunged again, snapping inches from a nurse's arm. Fear spread. Not panic, but calculation. No one wanted to be the one who made the wrong call. No one wanted to be responsible. Catherine stood at the back of the trauma bay, unnoticed, watching. She noticed the SEAL's fingers twitch, deliberate, not random. She noticed the dog's posture, not chaotic, not aggressive, protective. She noticed something else too, a small, almost imperceptible patch sewn into the SEAL's torn uniform. Her jaw tightened. The charge nurse whispered urgently, "We can't touch him." The surgeon hesitated. "If we wait for authorization, he'll die," someone else said. Silence fell. That was when Catherine stepped forward. "Hey," a resident hissed. "Rookie, don't." She ignored him. The handler turned sharply. "Ma'am, you need to stop right there." Catherine stopped 3 feet from the canine, close enough to die. The dog snarled, teeth flashing. The room froze. Catherine didn't raise her hands, didn't shout commands, didn't assert authority. She looked past the dog, straight at the wounded man, and spoke a single word. A code word. The growl stopped mid-throat. The handler stared in disbelief. The SEAL's eyes fluttered open, barely conscious, but his lips moved. "Clear her." The dog sat perfectly still, and the entire room realized, too late, that they had never been the ones in control. The silence lasted less than a second. Then the trauma bay exploded into motion. "Move! Get access now! Chest trauma tray now!" The canine remained seated, eyes tracking her every movement, but no longer hostile. The handler's grip loosened just enough for disbelief to register on his face. "What did you say to him?" he whispered. Catherine didn't answer. She was already working. She stripped back the blood-soaked sheets with one clean motion, exposing the SEAL's chest. The smell of iron filled the air, sharp, unmistakable. His breathing was shallow, uneven, each inhale visibly weaker than the last. "Vitals?" she asked. A monitor beeped erratically. "BP80 systolic and falling," a nurse replied. "Heart rate 140. CDMSS." Her hands moved to his chest, pressing lightly, feeling, not guessing. Her jaw tightened. "Pericardial tamponade," she said calmly. A surgeon scoffed. "You don't know that." Catherine didn't look at him. Blood's filling the sac around his heart. It's choking it. He's compensating, but not for long. "That's speculative," the surgeon snapped. "We need imaging." "We don't have time." The heart monitor shrieked. A sudden drop. Oxygen sats crashing. "Jesus!" Catherine turned. "Scalpel. Chest tube. Now." The surgeon bristled. "You are not authorized to—" The SEAL convulsed, body arching violently. The monitor flatlined for half a second, then stuttered back. That was enough. A senior nurse shoved the tray into Catherine's hands. "Do it." The surgeon swore under his breath. Catherine didn't hesitate. She made the incision with surgical precision, movements economical, practiced. Blood welled immediately. She worked fast. Too fast for someone labeled probationary. "Clamp," she said. A resident fumbled. Catherine took it herself without comment. She inserted the needle, angled just enough to avoid the lung, just enough to find the pocket. The moment pressure released, the change was instant. The monitor steadied. Heart rate slowed. Blood pressure climbed, shaky but alive. A collective breath escaped the room. The surgeon stared at the screen, stunned. That shouldn't have. Catherine was already sealing the line, securing it with hands that did not tremble. The SEAL's breathing deepened. Color returned faintly to his face. He was still alive. And then the consequences arrived. "What the hell do you think you just did?" The voice cut through the room like a blade. Hospital administration stood at the doorway. 2 suits, no scrubs, eyes sharp with liability. "You violated protocol," the administrator snapped. "You performed an unauthorized invasive procedure on a classified patient." Catherine straightened slowly. "I prevented cardiac arrest." "That's not your decision to make." The surgeon seized the opening. "She went rogue." "I told her to wait." Catherine said nothing. The charge nurse hesitated, then stepped back. The administrator pointed toward the door. "Escort her out immediately." The K-9 stood. The handler stiffened, but Catherine raised one finger. Calm, precise. The dog sat again. She removed her gloves, disposed of them neatly, and walked out without protest. The doors slammed shut behind her. The hallway felt colder, quieter. A security officer gestured sharply. "Badge, pending investigation," the officer said, avoiding her eyes. "You're suspended." Catherine nodded. No argument, no explanation. She walked past nurses who stared in confusion, past doctors who wouldn't meet her gaze. Behind her, alarms continued to sound, but steadier now. She had done her job. That was enough. 30 minutes later, the hospital locked down. No announcement. No warning. Elevators froze. Doors sealed. Phones stopped working. Then the sound came. Low, rhythmic, unmistakable. Helicopters. They circled once, then landed. Black SUVs rolled into the emergency bay. Men and women stepped out with clipped movements and expressions carved from discipline. Inside, administrators panicked. "What is going on? Who authorized this?" "Call legal." A colonel entered the lobby without slowing. "We're here for Lieutenant Commander Hale." Confusion rippled. "We don't have anyone by—" The colonel stopped. His eyes found Catherine instantly, standing quietly near the wall. He nodded once. "Respect." "Yes," he said, "you do." In Trauma Bay 1, the SEAL regained consciousness. Weak, but aware. He turned his head slightly. "Where's Hale?" The room went silent. The handler swallowed. They removed her. The SEAL's eyes hardened. "Then you'd better bring her back," he said, "before I do." The hospital had never felt smaller. Corridors that once echoed with routine suddenly carried a different kind of weight. Restrained urgency, disciplined silence. Staff moved carefully now, eyes darting toward sealed exits, and armed personnel stationed where volunteers used to stand. Hospital administration gathered in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the emergency wing. Suits argued in hushed, frantic tones. Who let the military lock down a civilian hospital? This is a legal nightmare. We need names. Now. No knock. A woman in a dark uniform entered first. Her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. A silver eagle marked her collar. Behind her came the colonel, calm, unhurried, and completely uninterested in hospital politics. "Who's in charge here?" he asked. The chief administrator straightened. "I am." The colonel regarded him for a moment, the way someone looks at an obstacle, not a person. "Not anymore," he said. The room fell silent. "This facility is now under temporary federal authority," the colonel continued, "due to the presence of an active Tier 1 asset and a compromised security event." "That's not possible," the administrator protested. "We have protocols." "You had protocols," the colonel corrected. "You ignored them." He placed a thin folder on the table. "Now we're going to talk about Nurse Catherine Hale." Elsewhere, Catherine sat alone in a small observation room near the nurses' lockers. The walls were bare. The chair was uncomfortable. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. She had been told nothing. She didn't ask. A young security officer stood outside the door, shifting nervously. He kept glancing at her as if expecting something. Anger, fear, defiance. Catherine gave him none of it. In Trauma Bay 1, the SEAL lay propped slightly upright, Monitors humming steadily now. His skin was pale, but his eyes were sharp, alert in a way that unsettled the attending surgeon. "You're stable," the surgeon said. "We'll prep you for transfer." The SEAL ignored him. "K9, he said. The handler stepped closer. "Sir, she speak the word right?" "Yes, sir." "Only one?" "Yes." The SEAL exhaled slowly. "That's because it's not a command," he said. "It's an identifier." The surgeon frowned. "Identifier?" The SEAL's gaze locked onto him. "You didn't ask who trained that dog." Silence. "You didn't ask why he stood down for her?" The surgeon swallowed. "You didn't ask who she was," the SEAL finished. Back in the conference room, the colonel opened the folder. Inside were documents, redacted heavily, stamped with classifications most civilians never saw. "You labeled her probationary," the colonel said calmly. "A rookie, unqualified." He slid one document forward. "That rookie has 15 years of field medical experience." Another page. "She served as a combat medic across 3 theaters." She was embedded with special operations units, so classified their existence was denied while she was saving their lives. The room paled. One administrator whispered, "That's impossible. She's too young," the colonel finished. "She started early." He leaned forward. "She requested reassignment. No rank, no recognition, no disclosure. You agreed." The chief administrator stammered. "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," the colonel said. A knock echoed softly. The woman with the silver eagle stepped back. "Bring her in." Catherine entered the conference room calmly. Every eye turned toward her. She stood straight, hands at her sides, eyes forward. No salute, no acknowledgement. Just presence. The colonel addressed the room. "You removed her from a trauma bay after she saved a life." He turned to Catherine, "Lieutenant Commander Hale." She met his eyes briefly. "Sir." The administrators stared. The surgeon who had argued with her earlier looked like he might be sick. The colonel continued. "The SEAL you treated requested your presence." A pause. "Do you wish to return to Trauma Bay 1? Catherine thought for exactly 1 second. "Yes," she said. As she walked back through the emergency wing, staff parted instinctively. Whispers followed her. "That's her. That's the nurse. Did you hear?" She ignored them all. The K9 stood when she entered the trauma bay, then sat. The handler stepped aside. The SEAL looked at her and nodded once. "Good work," he said. Catherine checked his vitals without comment. "You'll live," she said quietly. "That was never in doubt," he replied. Outside the bay, consequences began to fall. The surgeon was pulled aside. Administrators were questioned sharply. Policies were reviewed. Errors documented. No shouting, no spectacle. Just accountability. Catherine finished her assessment and stepped back. "You'll be transferred within the hour," she said. The SEAL watched her carefully. "You didn't have to come back," he said. "Yes," Catherine replied. "I did." She turned to leave. The SEAL spoke again. "You still teaching?" Catherine paused. "Yes." "Good," he said. "They need it." The hospital tried to return to normal. That was the official language, at least. Unofficially, nothing felt the same. Staff moved with a new caution, as if the building itself had shifted and no one was quite sure where the ground now stood. Conversations stopped when Catherine passed. Eyes followed her down hallways. Curious, wary, embarrassed. She noticed all of it. Catherine resumed her duties without ceremony. She didn't ask for her badge back. It was returned to her quietly, clipped to her locker without explanation. Her schedule repopulated in the system as if nothing had happened, except now her name appeared beside a new designation. Clinical Instructor, Interim. She read it once, nodded, and changed into her scrubs. In a closed administrative office on the 4th floor, the reckoning continued. The chief administrator sat across from 2 federal officials and the colonel. A digital recorder sat between them, its red light glowing steadily. You removed Nurse Hale from an active trauma bay, one official said. On what grounds? She violated protocol, the administrator replied stiffly. She exceeded her authority. Did she save the patient? Yes. Did any other physician initiate life-saving intervention before she did? No answer. The colonel waited. No, the administrator said quietly. The colonel nodded. Then protocol failed. She didn't. In another wing, the surgeon sat alone in an empty consultation room, staring at his hands. He replayed the moment over and over. The confidence in her voice, the speed of her hands, the way the room had followed her without realizing it. He had dismissed her, not because she was wrong, because she was quiet. The realization sat heavy in his chest. That afternoon, Catherine stood in a small training room with 6 nurses and 3 residents seated before her. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked openly intimidated. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't reference the morning. She simply turned on the overhead screen and spoke. Today, we're reviewing emergency response to cardiac tamponade when imaging is unavailable. Isn't that beyond our scope without... Yes, Catherine said evenly, which is why you need to understand it before it becomes your only option. She spoke without notes. She explained anatomy with clarity that cut through confusion. She described warning signs that most textbooks buried in footnotes. She demonstrated hand placement, angles, timing. Not once did she mention where she learned it. They didn't ask. By the end of the session, no one was doubting her. Later that evening, the handler from the K-9 unit found her in the staff lounge. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure whether to enter. Ma'am, he said. Catherine looked up. Yes? He hesitated. I've handled that dog for 6 years. He's never stood down for anyone but his primary. Catherine sipped her coffee. He recognized the word, she said. That word isn't in any manual, the handler said quietly. It's unit specific. Catherine met his eyes for the first time. Yes, that means you. She held up a hand. He stopped. Thank you, he said instead. Catherine nodded once. Word spread, as it always did. Not in announcements, but in fragments. A paramedic mentioned her name with reverence. A resident looked up her file and found it sealed. A nurse overheard a federal agent refer to her as the reason 3 men walked out alive. Each fragment added weight. Each weight added silence. No one asked her directly. Something about her made it clear she would not answer. The seal was transferred just after midnight. As he was wheeled out, he caught sight of Catherine standing near the nurse's station, charting. Lieutenant Commander, he called softly. She looked up. Thank you, he said. Not as a patient, but as a peer. She inclined her head slightly. Take care, she replied. The K-9 sat beside the gurney, watching her until the doors closed. In the days that followed, hospital leadership changed. Quietly. The chief administrator was placed on administrative leave pending review. The surgeon was reassigned and required to complete retraining under, to his visible discomfort. Policies were rewritten. New training modules added. The hospital's liability insurer issued a statement praising decisive clinical judgment under extreme conditions. Catherine's name appeared nowhere in it. She preferred it that way. One evening, Linda, the charge nurse who had once warned her to stay away from trauma, approached Catherine as she finished a shift. I owe you an apology, Linda said. Catherine paused. For what? For not seeing you, Linda replied. Catherine considered this. Then she said, You see now. Linda nodded. Yes, I do. As Catherine walked out into the cool night air, the hospital lights glowing behind her, she felt the familiar pull, the weight of memories she never shared, the lives she carried quietly with her. She had walked away from rank, from recognition, from power, not because she lacked it, but because she had learned, long ago, that the loudest people were rarely the most capable, and the most capable rarely needed to be loud. Tomorrow, she would teach again, train again, Stand quietly in the background while others learned how to step forward. And somewhere, a K-9 would still remember a word spoken once and obey. The second crisis didn't announce itself with helicopters or gunfire. It came quietly, a tremor in the routine. A hesitation where confidence should have been. Catherine noticed it during a night shift 3 days later, while observing a new intake in the pediatric wing. The monitors were stable, the child resting after a minor procedure, but the resident's hands shook as he adjusted the IV. Pause, Catherine said gently. The resident froze. I'm fine. You're not, Catherine replied. Not unkindly. And that's okay. Step back. He hesitated, pride flaring briefly, then stepped aside. Catherine corrected the line in seconds. Why did you hesitate? She asked. I didn't want to mess it up, he admitted quietly. Catherine nodded. Fear doesn't make you careful. It makes you late. She stepped back and gestured for him to resume. Again, she said, not everyone welcomed her presence. A senior attending named Dr. Reeves, respected, influential, and deeply unsettled by the shift in hierarchy, watched her from across the ward with narrowed eyes. She's overstepping, he muttered to another physician. This isn't a training camp. Dr. Reeves had built his reputation on control, on certainty, on never being questioned. Catherine questioned nothing. That, somehow, made it worse. The call came just after midnight. Multi-vehicle collision on the interstate. School bus involved. Multiple pediatric casualties. The ER braced. Doctors rushed to stations. Nurses prepped trauma bays. The air sharpened with urgency. Catherine stood at the edge of the room, observing, not commanding. Assignments? Someone asked. Dr. Reeves stepped forward. I'll lead. Catherine said nothing. The first gurney arrived carrying a child no older than 10. Unconscious. Shallow breathing. Blood at the nose. Possible internal bleeding, a resident said. Dr. Reeves hesitated. CT first, he decided. We don't want to rush invasive. The child convulsed. Monitors screamed. Catherine moved instantly. Airway compromised, she said. We don't have time. Dr. Reeves snapped. I didn't authorize. Catherine stopped. Not physically, verbally. She looked at him. Not challengingly, not angrily, but with quiet finality. If you want to lead, she said, lead. Silence. The child's oxygen saturation dropped further. Dr. Reeves swallowed. Proceed, he said. Catherine moved. The airway was secured. The bleeding controlled. The child stabilized. When it was over, Dr. Reeves stepped back, shaken. He didn't look at Catherine. But he didn't argue again. Hours later, the last patient was stabilized. The ER exhaled. Catherine removed her gloves and washed her hands slowly, thoroughly. Doctor, Reeves approached her at the sink. I don't like being challenged, he said bluntly. Catherine dried her hands. I didn't challenge you. You contradicted me. No, she said calmly. I gave you time. He studied her. You could have taken over. Yes. Why didn't you? Because if you're going to lead, she said, you need to learn how to decide under pressure, not hide behind protocol. Dr. Reeves looked away. The truth landed hard. Later that morning, Catherine stood once again in the training room, this time with twice as many attendees. Word had spread. She didn't acknowledge it. Medicine isn't about authority, she began. It's about responsibility. She paused, and responsibility doesn't wait for permission. No one spoke. No one needed to. As the shift ended, Catherine walked past the pediatric wing. The child from the bus crash slept peacefully, parents at the bedside, unaware of how close they had come to loss. Catherine watched for a moment. Then she walked on. That night, alone in her apartment, Catherine sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold. Outside, the city moved on. Sirens in the distance, lights blinking, life continuing. She thought of the past she never shared, the names she carried silently, the moments when hesitation had meant death and decisiveness had meant survival. She had chosen this life deliberately, not the shadows, not the ranks, not the salutes, but the quiet places where lives still hung in the balance, and someone needed to act. Tomorrow would bring another test. She was ready. The media arrived without warning. It began with a van parked across the street from the hospital, its satellite dish raised like an accusation. By noon, there were three more. Reporters lingered near the entrance, microphones ready, eyes scanning every face that passed through the sliding doors. Inside, tension crept back into the halls. "Someone leaked," a nurse whispered. "They're saying it was a seal." Another replied. "No," a resident said quietly. "They're saying it was her." Catherine heard none of it directly. She was in the ICU, reviewing post-op notes, when Linda approached her, unease written plainly across her face. "They're asking questions," Linda said, "about you." Catherine didn't look up. "They can ask. They want interviews." Catherine paused, then closed the chart. "I won't give one," Linda nodded. She had expected that. Hospital leadership convened an emergency meeting that afternoon. Legal counsel sat in, eyes sharp, voices clipped. "We need to control the narrative," one lawyer insisted. "If this becomes a public story—" "It already is," another administrator said. "They know a classified asset was treated here. They know a nurse intervened. The colonel joined via secure call. You will not release her name," he said flatly. "But the public doesn't need a hero," the colonel replied. "They need a system that works." Silence followed. "Handle your staff," he added. "We'll handle the rest." Despite the precautions, a journalist slipped through. She found Catherine in the cafeteria, alone at a corner table, reading while she ate. "Catherine Hale?" the reporter asked, voice polite, practiced. Catherine looked up slowly. "Yes. I'm with Channel 6. People are saying you saved a SEAL's life when no one else could. They're calling you a hero." Catherine considered her. "They're wrong," she said. The reporter blinked. "Wrong? But you spoke a code word to a military K-9, the reporter pressed. "That's not normal training." Catherine stood, gathering her tray. "No," she said evenly. "It isn't." "Then who are you?" the reporter asked. Catherine met her gaze. "Someone who knows when not to speak," she said, and walked away. That evening, a sealed envelope waited in Catherine's locker. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, request for temporary reactivation. National security exemption. Catherine stared at it for a long moment. She folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. The next emergency came at dusk. A private charter jet had made an emergency landing nearby. One passenger, a foreign diplomat's child, was unresponsive, suspected anaphylaxis complicated by unknown comorbidities. Federal agents filled the ER before the ambulance even arrived. The attending physician hesitated, reading the intake notes. "Allergies unknown," he said. "We need confirmation before—" "She's crashing," a nurse said urgently. Catherine stepped forward. The physician turned. "I didn't ask." Catherine raised a hand, not commanding, not interrupting, but grounding. "Look at her," Catherine said. The child's skin was mottled, her airway swelling visibly. "You have seconds," Catherine continued. "Protocols won't catch up in time." The physician swallowed. "Proceed," he said. Catherine administered treatment decisively, adjusting dosages with care born from experience that didn't come from textbooks. The child stabilized. A federal agent watched closely, eyes narrowing with recognition. Afterward, the agent approached her quietly. "You've done this before," he said. Catherine washed her hands. "Yes. Not here. No. You know they'll keep asking." "Yes. You could make this easier for yourself." "Easy isn't the goal," she said. That night, Catherine stood alone on the hospital roof. The city spread out beneath her. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. life fragile and relentless, went on. She thought of the envelope in her locker, of the past that refused to stay buried, of the choice she had made, again and again, to serve quietly even when silence cost more than speaking ever would. Tomorrow, the hospital would face another test. So would she. And neither would be able to pretend much longer that Catherine Hale was just another nurse. The meeting was not optional. That much was clear from the presence of two federal vehicles waiting outside Catherine's apartment building at dawn. No sirens, no urgency. Just inevitability. Catherine stepped into the back seat without resistance, hands folded in her lap as the city slid past the tinted windows. The agent said nothing. Neither did she. The facility they arrived at was nondescript. Concrete, glass, unmarked. Inside, security was layered and silent. She was led into a conference room with no windows. 3 people waited. The colonel. A woman in a dark suit with an intelligence badge Catherine recognized immediately. And a man whose rank she did not need to see to understand. Lieutenant Commander Hale, the man said. Thank you for coming. Catherine remained standing. You've been flagged, the intelligence officer continued. Repeatedly. We've managed to suppress exposure so far, but it's getting harder. You re-entered civilian service under special exemption, the colonel added. That exemption assumed minimal visibility. And minimal intervention, the suited woman said pointedly, which you've exceeded. People were dying. The man at the head of the table studied her. That's always your justification, he said. And it's always correct. He slid a folder across the table, which is why we're offering you something. Inside were papers, reinstatement orders, authority expanded, rank restored. You could take command again, the colonel said. Train nationally, influence policy, shape outcomes at scale. The intelligence officer leaned forward, and we could control the narrative. Catherine closed the folder. No, she said. Silence. The man raised an eyebrow. You're refusing a direct offer. Yes. Why? Catherine answered without hesitation. Because I chose the ground, she said. Not the tower. The suited woman frowned. That's not sustainable. Neither is ignoring the people actually doing the work, Catherine replied calmly. You understand the consequences. Yes, you will lose protection, he said. Exposure, scrutiny, possible reassignment without your consent. Catherine met his gaze. I've accepted worse. Another silence. Then the man nodded once. Very well. When Catherine returned to the hospital that evening, the atmosphere had changed again. Not fear this time. Respect. Doctors consulted her without hesitation. Nurses mirrored her calm. Residents listened. But with respect came distance. She felt it, the subtle shift from colleague to symbol. She didn't like it. The test came that night. A power outage swept through half the city after a transformer explosion. Backup generators kicked in, except one. The NICU went dark. Alarms screamed. Ventilators faltered. Catherine was already running. She coordinated without raising her voice, hands moving, mind calculating loads, oxygen needs, manual ventilation sequences. A resident froze, overwhelmed. Catherine took his hands and guided them. Breathe with them, she said. They'll follow. They did. The generators stabilized minutes later. No lives were lost. But the cost was visible on Catherine's face. Exhaustion, layered over something older. Later, alone in the stairwell, Dr. Reeves found her sitting on the steps. You could have taken control, he said quietly. I did, Catherine replied. No, he said. You could have owned it. Ownership isn't always leadership, she said. He nodded slowly. I think I understand now. As dawn broke, Catherine returned to the locker room. The sealed envelope was gone. In its place was a simple note. Stay safe. We're watching. Catherine folded it and slipped it into her pocket. She stepped back into the hospital corridors, into the noise, the light, the quiet emergencies waiting to happen. She had refused power. Now she would live with the cost. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. It didn't lead with Catherine's name. It led with outrage. Military asset nearly dies in civilian hospital. Who failed the protocols? Classified patient, unauthorized procedure. By noon, every screen in the staff lounge was tuned to a different channel, all repeating the same phrases with different faces. An anonymous source. A breach of protocol. A nurse who acted outside her scope. Catherine watched none of it. She was in the pediatric wing again, reading a story to a child whose parents hadn't arrived yet. The child listened, eyes wide, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the room. Hospital leadership convened another emergency meeting. This one felt different. The legal team was louder. The administrators were defensive. Someone needed to be named. "We have to show accountability," one executive said. "The public needs reassurance." "And the easiest way is to say she acted alone," another replied. Silence followed. No one said Catherine's name. They didn't need to. The summons came that afternoon. Catherine was asked, not ordered, to attend a review board. She arrived on time. Faces she recognized. Some she didn't. A panel chair spoke first. "Nurse Hale, you are being reviewed for actions taken during a classified emergency." Catherine nodded. "You performed an invasive procedure without authorization." "Yes." "You interacted with a military K-9 using undisclosed training." "Yes." "You have refused multiple requests for public clarification." "Yes." The chair leaned forward. "Do you understand how this looks?" Catherine considered the question. "It looks like someone lived," she said. A murmur rippled through the room. The chair frowned. "That's not the point." "No," Catherine agreed. "It isn't." Outside the hospital, protesters gathered, some in support, others furious. Signs waved. "Follow the rules. Who watches the watchers?" "Thank you, nurse." Catherine passed them without stopping. Head down, hands steady. That evening, the power failed again. Not electrical, but human. A resident misread a chart. A medication dosage was delayed. A patient coded. Catherine was there. She corrected. She intervened. She saved another life. And still, the narrative pressed harder. The review board reconvened the next morning. This time, witnesses were called. The K-9 handler spoke first. "That dog has never responded to anyone else," he said. "Ever." The SEAL's commanding officer spoke next. She acted with precision, consistent with top-tier combat medicine. The surgeon who had opposed her stood reluctantly. "I was wrong," he said. "I hesitated." The room shifted. The panel chair looked unsettled. "This isn't about heroism," he said weakly. "No," the colonel replied from the back of the room. "It's about competence." Public opinion shifted, slowly. Clips surfaced of patients Catherine had treated, families speaking in quiet gratitude, refusing to sensationalize. A veteran posted a single sentence online. "If you're alive because of her, you don't argue with paperwork." Hospital leadership tried to pivot. They announced a new training initiative. They praised teamwork. They avoided names. Too late. Catherine stood alone in the supply room that night, breathing slowly, grounding herself. She felt the weight now, not fear. Responsibility. The system had tried to use her, then to discard her. Now it was adjusting. Painfully, a message buzzed on her phone. Unknown number. Hold steady. Truth moves slower than lies, but it moves. Catherine deleted it. She didn't need reassurance. She had never needed it. The final meeting took place in the same glass-walled conference room where it had all begun. Only this time, the seats were rearranged. Hospital leadership sat on one side of the table. Federal observers sat on the other. No press, no cameras. Catherine stood alone at the far end. The chair of the board cleared his throat. "This review has concluded," he said. "Findings have been amended." It has been determined that Nurse Catherine Hale acted within reasonable clinical judgment under extraordinary circumstances. A pause. The hospital accepts responsibility for systemic failures that contributed to the incident. No apology followed. Catherine didn't expect one. The chair continued. As such, all disciplinary actions against Nurse Hale are rescinded. He slid a document across the table. Furthermore, we are formally offering you a permanent position as Director of Emergency Clinical Training. Catherine looked at the paper. Then she pushed it back. No, she said. A ripple of surprise crossed the room. This is not a symbolic role, the chair said quickly. It comes with authority, resources. I know what it comes with, Catherine replied. The colonel watched her carefully. And I won't be a figurehead, Catherine said. Or a shield. Silence deepened. Then what do you want? Catherine answered simply. Access. They waited. To the floor, she continued. To the students. To the people who hesitate because no one taught them what pressure feels like. Dr. Reeves spoke quietly. You already have that. For now, Catherine said, I want it written. The board exchanged glances. The chair nodded slowly. Granted. Outside, the hospital exhaled. No announcement was made. No ceremony held. Catherine returned to work the next day, as she always had. Same scrubs. Same calm. But something had changed. People trusted her now, not because of rumors or authority, but because they had seen what happened when she spoke and when she chose not to. Weeks passed. The media moved on. Another story replaced hers. But inside the hospital, training changed. Residents drilled under pressure. Nurses learned to trust instinct backed by preparation. Protocols were treated as tools, not shields, Catherine led quietly. One evening, the canine handler visited again. They're retiring him, he said. Full honors, Catherine nodded. He did well, she said. He recognized you, the handler added. That doesn't fade. Catherine looked toward the window. Neither does training, she said. On her last shift before taking a scheduled break, Catherine walked the halls slowly. She stopped at the pediatric wing, at the trauma bay, at the nurses' station where Linda worked. Linda smiled. You're staying, she said. Yes, but not climbing. No. Linda nodded, understanding now. As Catherine stepped outside, the city lights reflected in the glass behind her. She had been tested by ego, by power, by systems that preferred silence until it threatened them. And she had chosen, again, not revenge, not recognition. The call came just before dawn, not over the intercom, not from administration, from a nurse who trusted Catherine enough to bypass the chain entirely. Catherine, Linda said quietly into the phone, we have a situation. Catherine was already sitting up. What kind? There was a pause. The kind that carried weight. Military transport. Emergency diversion. One patient critical, K9 unit attached. Catherine closed her eyes for half a second. I'm on my way, she said. The hospital was still shaking off sleep when she arrived. The early light outside cast long shadows across the ER entrance, and for a moment it felt eerily familiar, as if time had folded in on itself. Then she heard it, the low thrum of rotors. Not one helicopter. Two. They descended in tandem, blades chopping the air into submission. Armed escorts moved with efficiency, securing the perimeter with the quiet confidence of people who had done this before. Inside, staff assembled quickly, but this time, no one hesitated. No one argued. They looked to Catherine. She didn't step forward immediately. She watched, observed, let them move. The gurney came through the doors fast. The patient was young, early 20s at most, a soldier, barely conscious, blood soaked through the field dressing on his torso, and beside him, pacing, alert, eyes sharp, was a military canine. Not the same one, but trained the same way. A resident swallowed hard. He's not letting anyone close. The handler spoke tightly. He's protecting the handler he lost. Patient was his last command. The dog snarled as a nurse took a step forward. Catherine stayed where she was. She scanned the room. This was not her moment. Not yet. "Who's primary?" she asked. Dr. Reeves stepped forward without hesitation. "I am," he said. Catherine nodded once. "Good," she replied. Dr. Reeves approached the gurney slowly, hands visible, voice calm. The canine growled. Reeves stopped. He looked back at Catherine, not for permission, but for grounding. She met his eyes. "Breathe," she said. "Let him see your intent." Reeves nodded, inhaled slowly, exhaled. The dog's growl softened, but did not stop. The patient's vitals dropped suddenly. "BP falling," someone called. "We don't have time," a resident said. Catherine took one step forward, then stopped. She turned to a young nurse standing frozen near the wall. "Your call," Catherine said. The nurse blinked. "Mine?" "Yes," Catherine replied calmly. "What do you see?" "He's bleeding internally if we don't relieve pressure." "Say it," Catherine said. "He dies." Catherine nodded. "Then act." The nurse stepped forward, hands shaking, but moving. "Doctor." Reeves followed her lead instantly. The canine lunged once, then stopped, sat, watching. The room moved as one. The procedure was messy, fast, imperfect, and it worked. The patient stabilized. The monitor steadied. A life held. When it was over, the room stood in silence. Not shock this time, but understanding. Catherine hadn't spoken the word. She hadn't needed to. The handler approached her afterward. "That dog," he said quietly, stood down because he recognized trust. Catherine nodded. "Training adapts," she said. "So do people." Later, as the patient was transferred, the young nurse approached Catherine, eyes bright with something between relief and awe. "I almost froze," she admitted. "But you didn't," Catherine replied, "because you were there." Catherine shook her head gently. "No," she said, "because you were ready." That evening, Catherine sat alone in the empty training room. Lights dimmed, chairs neatly aligned. The whiteboard still held diagrams from a lesson she'd taught days earlier. She erased them slowly, carefully, one by one. She thought of the first day she'd walked into this hospital. Unseen, underestimated, dismissed. She thought of the code word, of the dog that had listened, of the system that hadn't, and then, slowly, had learned. Dr. Reeves found her there as the sun dipped below the horizon. "You never stepped in," he said. Catherine capped the marker. "You didn't need me to." He nodded. That was the lesson, wasn't it? "Yes," she said. He hesitated. "What happens when you leave?" Catherine looked around the room. "Nothing," she said. And that's the point. As she walked out into the quiet night, the hospital lights glowing steadily behind her, Catherine felt something rare settle into place. Not closure. The work would go on. The people would carry it forward. And somewhere, in a moment of fear and hesitation, someone would remember what calm looked like and choose it. The hospital settled into a quieter rhythm after that night. Not calmer. Hospitals never truly were. But steadier. Decisions came faster. Voices lowered when urgency rose. People checked on one another without being told. Catherine noticed the changes the way she noticed everything else, without comment. She moved through the halls as she always had, but now conversations bent subtly around her presence. Not out of fear, out of awareness. People had learned that calm was contagious, and that panic, once introduced, spread faster than any infection. She taught more now, though nothing in her title had changed. In the early mornings, before rounds began, residents gathered in unused conference rooms while the city outside was still waking up. Catherine spoke to them about uncertainty, not as an abstract concept, but as a physical sensation. "The first thing you'll lose under pressure," she told them, "is your sense of time. The second is your confidence. If you don't train through that, knowledge won't save you. They listened. They practiced. They failed safely, then learned. Not all resistance vanished. A few senior staff still bristled when Catherine corrected them gently. Some avoided her altogether, uncomfortable with the mirror she held up. Not of inadequacy, but of unexamined habit. Catherine let them. Change, she knew, was not something you forced. It was something you survived long enough to see. One afternoon, she was called to the administrative wing again. This time, there were no federal observers, no sealed folders, just Linda, Dr. Reeves, and a new interim director. "We're updating our mentorship program," the director said carefully. "We want your input. Specifically," Linda added, "we want to know how you do what you do without burning out." Catherine considered the question. "I don't carry what isn't mine," she said finally. They waited. Her last full shift came quietly. No announcement, no farewell cake. She moved through the hospital doing what she always had, checking, adjusting, listening. She paused longer at bedsides than before, not out of sentimentality, but intention. One patient squeezed her hand and whispered, "Thank you." Catherine squeezed back once. That was enough. At the end of the shift, she walked past the ER entrance. The glass reflected her, older than when she'd arrived, calmer than most people ever noticed. Outside, a police dog unit passed by on routine patrol. The canine's ears perked as it caught her scent. The handler smiled faintly. Curious, the dog sat. Catherine paused. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Some training stayed with you forever. Weeks later, the hospital functioned without her constant presence, and that was the measure of success. Residents made decisions with confidence. Nurses spoke up early. Doctors asked questions instead of defending positions. Mistakes still happened, but fewer lives were lost to hesitation. Catherine spent her mornings teaching in smaller settings now. Community clinics, training centers, places without cameras or headlines. She taught people how to stay calm when everything else failed, how to recognize fear without obeying it, how to act when no one was watching. Sometimes someone would ask about the story, about the seal, the K9, the code word. Catherine always redirected. "That wasn't the lesson," she'd say. And somehow they understood. On a quiet evening months later, Catherine returned to the hospital, not for work, but to visit. She stood once more outside Trauma Bay 1. The room was busy now. A new team, new faces, confident hands. She watched for a moment. Then she turned and walked away. The narrator's voice softens. Some heroes don't chase recognition. Some don't wear rank. Some don't tell their stories at all. They step forward when others hesitate. They step back when others are ready. And they leave behind something stronger than their name. Catherine was never meant to be remembered. She was meant to be effective. And because of that, countless lives would go on, unaware of how close they had come and how quietly they had been saved. Like, subscribe, and comment what you would have done